Spring games are officially over, which means it's time for our spring top 25. And starting tomorrow, our official record predictions for the 2025 season. That's right, it's prediction season. But first, let's figure out what order we're going to be predicting the team's records in. We'll start it off at the bottom of the rankings, number 25.
And that number 25 team is the Louisville Cardinals. Replacing Tyler Shuff is going to be a very interesting task, but they went out and got Miller Moss in the transfer portal from USC. He did have his ups and downs, but overall, I think he's going to be a solid quarterback and definitely one that they can win and compete in the ACC with. So I think based off of last season with how good they were, I think there's just a little bit of a downgrade at the quarterback position, but I think they're going to be a solid team overall.
Yeah, definitely one of the favorites in the ACC. Next up at 24 is going to be Michigan. And the Wolverines going to have a very different look on offense in 2025 with Bryce Underwood as the starting quarterback, most likely. He is a true freshman. So there's a lot of uncertainty there, which is why we have Michigan ranked a lot lower than probably many of the other polls that you'll see. However, the Wolverines are always going to have a good defense. Really, the fact that there's so much uncertainty on the offensive side of the ball is why we see them down here.
There's definitely some room for them to move up because they did have two impressive wins to end the season last year with essentially the people that will be playing both offense and defense this upcoming season. But then at 23, we have yet another ACC contender, this time being Miami. Cam Ward was the number one overall pick in the NFL draft, and to replace him, the Miami Hurricanes went out and got Carson Beck from Georgia. While not as good as Cam Ward, he does have plenty of experience and winning experience at Georgia, and hopefully he's able to rebound after a pretty mediocre year last season. I think Miami addressed the defensive concerns as well. It just comes down to how difficult their schedule will end up being to see how high this team can fly. But for right now, they are definitely going to be a top 25 team.
Next at number 22 is Kansas State. Avery Johnson returning at quarterback, one of the better quarterbacks in the Big 12. And I think this Wildcats team is going to be very solid. The Big 12 conference, as we know, is always wide open. So Kansas State definitely going to be one of those teams that has a chance to contend for the conference title.
And right above them at 21 is another Big 12 team competing for that conference title. This time it is Iowa State, coming off one of their best seasons in program history and returning a ton of starting production, including starting quarterback Rocco Becht, but losing two wide receivers to the NFL draft, both to the Texans. But the returning production is greater for Iowa State compared to Kansas State. So that's why we're having them slightly ahead of the Wildcats.
Next up at number 20 is a college football playoff team from 2024 in the SMU Mustangs. Kevin Jennings back at quarterback. But overall, SMU had a very easy schedule in 2024. Were they really a top 12 team? Tough to say, especially with how they performed in that Penn State game. We like them a little bit lower here at number 20. I think they're just a little bit better than those teams that we saw from 21 to 25, though still definitely worthy of this top 20 ranking.
Then coming in at 19 is going to be Baylor. Baylor is a team that I am very high on. Jonas a little less high on them, but still thinks they have dark horse potential. I think they have a recipe for success, returning so much starting production, particularly on the offensive side of the ball, with Sawyer Robinson back at quarterback, their running back duo returning, and having a good majority of their wide receiver room returning as well. They just have to win at least one of their big Big 12 matchups along with SMU on their schedule. I think this team is built for success and is going to be ready to take off next season. So we're going to have them slide in at 19.
Yeah, Baylor's definitely a team that I like quite a bit. However, there's another Big 12 team I like a little bit more. We'll see them in just a minute. But at number 18 is Indiana. The Hoosiers also coming off of a college football playoff berth in 2024, shocking a lot of people. They went 11 and 1, but kind of like SMU, benefited from a very easy schedule. Not quite as easy this season, and they lost Curtis Rourke to the NFL draft, replaced him with Fernando Mendoza, a quarterback from Cal, who is actually, I saw recently, one of the top quarterback prospects for the 2026 NFL draft. If he performs up to expectations, there's no doubt that Curt Cignetti will once again have Indiana trying to shock the world. Number 17, going to be Oklahoma. The Sooners brought in John Matier out of the transfer portal from Washington State. We saw how that panned out last season with Cam Ward going to Miami. He ended up going number 1 overall. If Matier gives that same level of performance to Oklahoma, look out as the Sooners will improve a ton in the SEC. They also added one of the top running backs in the transfer portal in Jaden Ott. He was one of the reasons we were very high on Cal earlier. Now, not so much. He's a Sooner. The Sooners got even better. They deserve this number 17 ranking.
Especially after last season that saw them beat Alabama in that crazy upset to basically eliminate any chance Alabama had of making the college football playoffs. I think they have a lot to build on from last season, and bringing in those two big transfer portal acquisitions is going to help them get there. At 16, we're going to have Texas A&M. Marcel Reed is back as their starting quarterback, going to have a full season to take over this A&M offense. I think they just got a really tough draw with their schedule last year. Got another tough one this year, but I think with a full year of Marcel Reed, once again, that they're going to improve vastly compared to what they had last year, maybe getting to 9 or even 10 wins.
Now, at number 15, this is the Big 12 dark horse that I was talking about, Texas Tech. The Red Raiders spent millions of dollars upgrading their football facilities, and they brought in the number 2 transfer portal class, going to make sure they get good use out of those facilities this season. And they're bringing back Baron Morton at quarterback. Just so much returning for this Texas Tech team, and they're adding a ton of transfer portal talent. This is a scary team in 2025 that could make a run at a Big 12 title.
Ahead of them at number 14 is going to be the Alabama Crimson Tide. Year 2 under Caleb DeBoer is looking up, even though they have to replace Jalen Milroe at quarterback. The quarterback competition between Austin Mack and Ty Simpson has been very interesting and competitive. Either one of them, I think, is going to be a solid leader for this offense, especially with Ryan Williams returning for his sophomore season after an incredible 17-year-old freshman season. I think Alabama is going to definitely bring it next year and look more like those Nick Saban years we saw from the Crimson Tide. At 13, we're going to have BYU, another powerhouse in the Big 12, one of our top 4 teams. Returning Jake Retzlaff at the quarterback position after last season saw them start the season off, I believe, 9-0 before starting to trip up down the stretch of the season, but completing their season with a huge bowl win over Shadur Sanders and Travis Hunter in the Colorado Buffaloes. So I think BYU, with all the returning production they have, is in a prime position to really compete for the Big 12 title. It really just comes down to their schedule and avoiding that collapse that we saw last season.
Coming in at number 12 is South Carolina, just one game shy of the college football playoff last year, and they arguably should have beat LSU. Definitely a tough scene for South Carolina fans, but 2025 is looking up. LaNorris Sellers is back at quarterback, and with how close they played some of the top teams in the SEC last year, there's a lot of reason for hope for South Carolina. I think they're going to be a really solid team once again. The schedule also gives them a chance to maybe make a run towards the conference championship.
And then at number 11, right outside of our top 10, we have Illinois, a team that a lot of people are hyping up to be the next Indiana, with Luke Altmaier returning at the starting quarterback position after one of their best seasons in program history, or at least in recent memory. I do think they benefit from a very easy schedule, but still have two difficult games. One of those being Ohio State, the other difficult game being a road trip to Washington. They also have a tough non-conference game against Duke on the road as well. But this Illinois team, with that returning production, definitely has a lot of capabilities to shock some people. And we do have them over South Carolina because remember, these two teams are essentially the same from last season, and Illinois got the win in their bowl game over South Carolina.
Coming in at number 10 is going to be the LSU Tigers. LSU is bringing back Garrett Nussmeier at quarterback, one of the early Heisman Trophy favorites alongside Cade Klubnik and Arch Manning. I think that the Tigers are going to be a very scary team in 2025. Should be much improved from what we saw last year, where I think they were a little bit disappointing compared to what a lot of people were expecting. This year, there's a chance that they can make that playoff push.
At number nine, we have yet another SEC school, this time being Florida, a team that people are pretty high on, but I don't think nearly as high on as Jonah and I. We have them cracking our top 10. DJ Lagway is going to be phenomenal next year as long as he stays healthy. We saw the glimpses of a electric player, a player that almost single-handedly led Florida to a win over Georgia. I think despite having such a difficult schedule with so many returning guys on this team and young returning guys, Florida is in a prime position to really compete for an SEC title. A lot's going to have to go their way if that's going to be true because that schedule, once again, is so difficult, but I think they're cut out for it.
At number 8, this is probably a little bit lower than you're used to seeing Oregon in some top 25 polls at this point. But we think that with the loss of Dylan Gabriel and how many question marks there are for this team, the defense probably not going to be quite as good as last season. The offense, you're losing Tez Johnson at wide receiver. And Dante Moore, well, a lot of people are very high on him, has a lot of question marks as a young quarterback. We just need to see a little bit more from Oregon before we can really move them up in these rankings because, as you'll notice, the common theme with the teams above them is returning talent.
And at number seven is going to be Arizona State. This might be the opposite of Oregon. This is probably higher than a lot of people are expecting them. But we think Arizona State is just returning so much production from a very successful team last year. Remember, they were projected to finish at the bottom of the Big 12 and went on to win it. Now, Cam Skadaboo is gone. He's off to the NFL, but they do have Sam Levitt returning as their starting quarterback. He's likely going to be the number one quarterback in the Big 12 conference as well as a Heisman candidate. They do have their wide receiver room returning. I think this team is just going to be incredible once again now that they have a taste of being a legit contender and we saw them compete with Texas. I think Arizona State is here to stay, and I think seven is a very appropriate ranking for them right now.
And at number 6 is going to be the Georgia Bulldogs. Carson Beck is gone. Gunnar Stockton replacing him in the bowl game. They lost to Notre Dame. And keep in mind, Notre Dame went on to make the national championship game. However, this Georgia team has a few question marks actually heading into 2025. The big thing, you still have Kirby Smart as your head coach. They're going to be just fine. But there's a few more teams that we like just a little bit more, which is why Georgia's just barely outside of our top five.
As we move into our top five, I will say prior to talking about any of these teams, we both believe that this is the non-negotiable. These are the top five teams going into next year, and it is definitely going to be in this order as of right now. And it's going to start off with the runner-ups from the national title game last year being the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Now, they do have to replace Riley Leonard as their starting quarterback. They did bring in a transfer as well as having, I believe, a young freshman talent that they have competing for that starting job. But the big returning story is going to be Jeremiah Love, likely going to be the number one running back in the country next year. Maybe the position player Heisman front runner with Jeremiah Smith. And I think this defense is also just spectacular year after year. The secondary, as we saw last year, ran man coverage so well that it's going to be difficult to stop this Notre Dame defense.
Yeah, Notre Dame, while they did lose Riley Leonard, CJ Carr or Kenny Minchey, I think will do just fine at the quarterback position, which is why we are very confident that Notre Dame, once again, will be a top five team in 2025. Coming in at number four is Penn State. And wow, did Penn State bring back a lot of talent. Obviously, they lost Abdul Carter to the NFL draft, but other than that, you got Drew Aller back, Katron Allen, and Nick Singleton at running back. They brought in some talent at wide receiver, which is very important because we know last year Tyler Warren was their leading receiver as tight end. So definitely going to be a little bit of question marks on the offensive side of the ball, but James Franklin's the head coach still. And the biggest addition, in my opinion, they were able to steal Ohio State's defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles, who led the number one defense on a national championship team. That's a massive addition for Penn State. And I think that the defense is going to be one of the things that carries them to this number four ranking in 2025.
Yeah, Penn State is going to be an amazing team next year. They're probably following the same blueprint that Michigan had 2 years ago and Ohio State had last year. And I would think that most people are saying Penn State is likely the front runner in the Big Ten to win the conference. I don't necessarily agree, but I definitely think they're going to give Ohio State and Oregon a run for their money this year.
They definitely have the best chance this season than they have in the past few years, and they are going to pump a lot of talent into the NFL draft in 2026.
Speaking of pumping talent into the NFL draft next year, we have Clemson coming in at number three, and I don't even know where to start with Clemson. Dabo finally used the transfer portal after putting it off for so many seasons and has built a juggernaut of a team. He's brought back Cade Klubnik at the starting quarterback position, likely going to be one of the favorites for both the Heisman Trophy next season as well as maybe a number one overall pick in the NFL draft. And then on the defensive side of the ball, they have some of the best defensive linemen in all of college football, that being TJ Parker and Peter Woods, both projected top five talents in next year's NFL draft. Clemson is going to be the by far front runner in the ACC, has a legitimate argument to be the number one team in the country next year.
Coming in at number two is going to be the defending national champions in Ohio State. Now, the main reason that we had to split them in Texas at one and two as we did, Texas has a quarterback who started a few games in Arch Manning, whereas Ohio State has a competition going on between Julian Sayin and Lincoln Keenholz. Most likely, Sayin's going to win the job as a former five-star recruit who transferred from Alabama before last season. The main reason that Ohio State deserves this number two ranking, they have the best player on the offensive side of the football in college football and the best player on the defensive side of the ball in Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs. Both of these players are absolutely ridiculous. And with them leading either side of the football, I can't see Ohio State struggling that much, no matter who ends up being the starting quarterback.
It's said time and time again, Ohio State doesn't rebuild, they retool. Overall, I think Ohio State is going to be very, very good next year, but not as good as our number one team as of right now, and that is the Texas Longhorns. Arch Manning, probably the most hyped up player in all of college football for next season. He does have starting experience from last year while Quinn Ewers was injured, dual threat capability, has plenty of weapons surrounding him and has probably the number one defense going into next year, considering how much Steve Sarkisian has used the transfer portal to build this team. I don't know if it is actually true, but I believe he is spending over $40 million to build this team. And I think that money has been put to tremendous use on both sides of the football. I think without a doubt at this point, Texas has the least amount of questions surrounding this team and is undoubtedly the number one team in college football right now.
Yeah, and what a treat we're going to have with them going on the road to face Ohio State to start the year. If you want to see what we think is going to happen in that game, go check out our Texas predictions video tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, and Ohio State will be the day after. So please make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our future videos, as right after this, we will be predicting every single Power 4 team's record for 2025. You don't want to miss it. We'll see you then.